Americans now believe they need $1.46 million to retire comfortably. That number is up 15% from last year, according to Northwestern Mutual's 2026 Planning and Progress Study. And if you've seen that figure lately and felt your stomach drop, you are not alone. But here's what that headline is hiding. The real barrier most people face isn't $1.46 million. It's a $12,000 gap, the difference between what Social Security pays a typical couple and what they actually spend each year. That's the number worth solving, not the scary one. Think about that for a second. If you've been measuring yourself against $1.46 million and feeling like you're falling short, you may have been running the wrong race entirely. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to walk you through 8 stats that cut through the noise and show you the exact math that closes that $12,000 hole without needing $1 million. Some of these numbers surprised me when I first saw them. They'll probably surprise you too. If you're somewhere in your late 50s or early 60s and you're worried you'll outlive your savings, stick around. I'm going to give you the real numbers, not the industry's scare tactics. And if you want more of this, go ahead and subscribe. I break down retirement math like this every week. Let's start with the math that actually matters. The average Social Security benefit for a retired worker right now is about $1,976 a month. For a couple, that's roughly $3,952 a month, or just under $48,000 a year. If your household spending runs around $60,000 a year, which is a common planning target for a comfortable but not extravagant retirement, you're looking at a $12,000 shortfall. That's the real number. Not $1.46 million, $12,000 a year. Now here's where the industry gets this wrong. The standard advice is to save 25 times your annual spending before you retire. At $60,000 a year, that's $1.5 million. And on paper, that math works. But it ignores the fact that Social Security is already covering about 80% of that spending for a median earning couple. You don't need to self-fund the whole thing. The problem is, when people see that $1.46 million target and they're sitting on $300,000 or $400,000, they assume they're hopelessly behind. So they keep working. They push retirement back to 67, then 68, then 70. And every year they delay, they're trading their healthiest years for a larger account balance they may never fully use. If you've been feeling like a failure because you don't have $1 million, stop right there. The problem is not your savings. The problem is the math you were given. That $12,000 gap is real, but it's a solvable problem. Most people have tools sitting right in front of them that could close it entirely, without needing to double their portfolio. We'll get into those in a minute. But before we do, here's what I want you to hold on to. The retirement industry sells fear because fear sells products. A scary headline gets clicks. A $1.46 million target gets people to buy managed funds and annuities and financial plans. That's not a conspiracy. It's just how the business works. Your job is to understand the actual math, not the marketing. And the actual math says your gap is $12,000 a year. That's $1,000 a month. That's the problem we're actually solving today. Now, the surprising part, most people don't realize how close they already are to closing it. I used to think you absolutely needed $1 million to retire. I was wrong. The data from Goldman Sachs and Northwestern Mutual's most recent surveys changed my mind, and I want to show you exactly why. A Goldman Sachs retirement survey from 2025 found that 58% of Americans expect to outlive their savings. That's a majority. And what their research also found is that people with a blended income strategy, meaning more than one source of income in retirement, could increase their effective retirement income by about 23%, not by saving more, by structuring what they already have differently. That's the foundation of what I call the three-layer bridge. It's three simple components that, when combined, can close that $12,000 annual gap without requiring a $1 million portfolio. The first layer is part-time work in early retirement. Not full-time work, something flexible and low stress. Consulting in your field, tutoring, part-time retail, whatever fits your life. Even $5,000 to $10,000 a year cuts that gap nearly in half. The second layer is delayed Social Security claiming, and this one has the biggest math. At your full retirement age of 67, the average monthly benefit is about $1,976. Every year you delay past that, your benefit grows by 8%. Wait until age 70, and that's a 24% increase. Roughly $2,450 a month instead of $1,976. For a couple, that moves the annual household income from about $48,000 to around $58,800. That's nearly $11,000 more per year just from waiting 3 years to claim. The third layer is home equity as a backup, a line of credit or a downsizing option you hold in reserve. You don't necessarily need to use it. Having it there means you don't have to sell investments in a down market to cover short-term gaps. None of these layers is complicated, and none of them requires you to suddenly save an extra $600,000 in the next 5 years. Together, they close the gap, or get very close to it, for most people in their late 50s and early 60s. Now, when I explain this to people, there's usually one question that stops them cold. What about healthcare? That's the fear that keeps people working longer than they want to. Let's look at the numbers there. Healthcare is the fear that keeps people working 5 to 10 years longer than they want to. And it's not irrational. Medical costs are real, and a serious illness in retirement can be expensive. But most people are carrying a much larger fear than the actual numbers justify. Here's the actuarial picture. According to SSA life tables, a 65-year-old today has an average remaining life expectancy of about 20 years. That's your baseline. But the distribution matters. About 25% of people who reach age 65 will live past 90. That's a 30-year retirement for 1 in 4 people. This is why the 4% withdrawal rule was built for a 30-year horizon. If you retire at 62, you're planning for 35 years. That sounds long. But the math still holds when you're using the three-layer bridge, because you're not drawing down your portfolio in the early years. Your part-time income and optimized Social Security are doing the heavy lifting. The 2008 crisis showed us what actually goes wrong in retirement. Retirees who panic sold when markets dropped 40% locked in permanent losses. The ones who had a flexible income source, a part-time job, a rental, a reduced spending plan, didn't need to touch their portfolios. They recovered within 5 years and ended up fine. The portfolio alone wasn't the answer. The bridge income was. And here's what most people get wrong about healthcare specifically. Medicare kicks in at 65. If you retire at 62, you have a 3-year gap to cover. That's real, and it needs a plan. But it's a $1,000 to $1,500 a month problem, not a $600,000 problem. It's manageable with a small bridge income or short-term coverage. Now, there's one more spending myth worth clearing up, because it changes the math on how much you actually need in your later years. There's a popular theory in retirement planning called the spending smile. The idea is that retirees spend a lot early on, slow down in the middle years, then spike again at the end for healthcare. And for financial planning purposes, it's often used to justify saving as much as possible before you retire. But for most Americans, that late life spike is smaller than the projections suggest. Research consistently shows that real household spending declines after age 75, not because people are sick, but because activity naturally slows. The big travel, the home renovations, the eating out, those happen in your 60s, not your 80s. That's the trade-off nobody talks about. Work until you're 67, hit your $1.5 million target, and you may have exactly the savings you planned for. But your best active years are already behind you. I've watched this happen more than I'd like. Someone retires with a beautiful portfolio and says, "Now I'll finally travel," and then realizes their knees won't cooperate anymore. I'll admit, I used to think retirement without a huge cushion would just mean sitting at home being bored. But what I've actually seen is that the people who retire earlier, with less money but more flexibility, tend to use their healthy years in ways the late retirees never get to. According to Northwestern Mutual's 2026 study, 48% of Americans fear outliving their savings. But the actual Gallup data shows the average retirement age is 62, which means most people are already making this call earlier than they planned. The fear is real, but so is the cost of waiting. Every year you delay past 62 is a year of healthy time you can't get back. That's not a metaphor, that's math. Let me run through a real scenario, because this is where theory meets reality. You retire at 62 with $300,000 saved. Social Security hasn't started yet. You're planning to claim at 70 for the larger benefit. Then, in your first year of retirement, the market drops 20%. Here's what happens to two different people in the exact same situation. Person A panics. They're watching their $300,000 shrink to $240,000, and they're scared, so they move to cash. They lock in those losses permanently. With no other income, they start pulling $12,000 a year from the portfolio to cover their gap. By age 75, the money is gone. Person B has the three-layer bridge. They have $8,000 a year coming in from part-time consulting. That covers most of their gap. They have a home equity line of credit sitting untouched as a backup, so they don't need to sell a single stock. They wait. Over the next 3 years, the portfolio recovers. At 70, their Social Security benefit kicks in at roughly $2,450 a month instead of $1,976. And they continue with 4% withdrawals safely from a portfolio that was never depleted. The difference between those two outcomes isn't the size of the portfolio, it's the structure around it. The 4% rule, developed by financial researcher William Bengen in 1994 and backed by decades of subsequent analysis, shows about a 95% historical success rate over a 30-year retirement. That math holds, but it assumes you're not forced to sell in a down year to pay your bills. That's what the bridge prevents. So yes, the market can drop. Your plan needs to account for that. And the good news is, the tools to do it aren't complicated. Let me walk you through the exact steps. Let me make this concrete. Here are 3 steps you can actually do. Step 1 is finding your real gap. Not the industry's gap, your gap. Sit down and write out your essential monthly expenses. Your mortgage or rent, utilities, food, insurance, car, medication, and anything else that's non-negotiable. Add it up. Then look up your expected Social Security benefit at ssa.gov. They have a personalized estimate tied to your actual work history. Subtract one from the other. That number, whatever it is the only gap that matters. Not $1.46 million, your actual monthly shortfall. Step 2 is to seriously consider delaying Social Security. Northwestern Mutual's 2026 data shows only 30% of Gen X workers plan to delay claiming until age 70. That means 70% are leaving money on the table. Every year you wait past your full retirement age, your benefit grows by 8%. For a couple, that can be an extra $10,000 or more per year for the rest of your lives. That alone can close most gaps for most people. Step 3 is building your bridge income. This doesn't need to be a full second career. Think about what you're good at and what someone would pay you for on a flexible basis. Consulting in your old field, tutoring, bookkeeping, project work. Even $500 to $800 a month bridges a lot of gaps and keeps you from drawing down your portfolio in the early years. I've been close to this situation personally. I helped my own parents run this exact math, and what looked like an impossible shortfall turned out to be a $900 monthly gap, closed entirely with a part-time income and a slightly delayed Social Security claim. Let me give you one more example to make this real. Karen is 62. She retired with $300,000 saved and a part-time consulting arrangement that brings in $20,000 a year. Her Social Security benefit as a single person is $24,000 a year. Total income, $44,000. Her spending is $46,000. She has a $2,000 gap, and she's covering it with a modest monthly drawdown that doesn't threaten her portfolio because she's not planning to claim Social Security yet. At 70, her monthly benefit goes up significantly, and her part-time work eventually winds down naturally. She's fine. That's what the bridge looks like in real life. Nothing dramatic. Just a plan that doesn't require you to hit an arbitrary 7-figure target before you feel safe. But here's the thing most people don't expect when they finally start running this math. The biggest obstacle isn't financial at all. Here's something I've noticed after watching a lot of people go through this decision. The financial math is often the easier part. The harder part is what happens in your head. Most people who are afraid to retire aren't really afraid of running out of money. They're afraid of losing something harder to name. The structure, the sense of purpose, the identity that comes from being someone who works, who produces, who shows up somewhere every morning. That fear is completely normal, and it's worth taking seriously, not as a reason to stay at a job you've outgrown, but as something to plan for intentionally. The research from this channel's audience consistently shows that the adjustment period in the first year of retirement is real. But past that first year, the majority of retirees say they're happier. Not because they have more money, because they have more time, and they've figured out how to use it. Retirement is not an ending. It's a shift in how you spend your time and energy. You can still work, just differently. You can consult, volunteer, teach, or build something you actually care about. The goal is to use your savings to buy time, not to stop doing anything meaningful. So when Northwestern Mutual's 2026 data tells you that 48% of Americans fear outliving their savings, remember this. The deeper risk is outliving your healthy, active years while waiting for a number that may never feel big enough. The question isn't whether you have enough. The question is whether you're using the time you have. Let's bring it back to where we started. The $12,000 gap is real. It's not made up, but it's solvable. And for most people watching this, it's far more solvable than the $1.46 million headline made it seem. The 3-layer bridge is your framework. A flexible income source to cover the early years. An optimized Social Security strategy to increase your lifetime benefit, and a home equity backup you may never need to use. None of it requires a perfect portfolio. It requires a plan. I don't know your exact situation. Your expenses are different. Your work history is different. Your health is different. But the numbers don't lie. And what the numbers consistently show is that most people need far less than they've been told and have more flexibility than they realize. If you're in your late 50s or early 60s, and you've never actually sat down and run your personal gap number, that's the one thing I'd ask you to do this week. Go to ssa.gov, look up your estimated benefit, subtract it from your monthly spending, and see what you're actually working with. You might be a lot closer than you think. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, subscribe. Next week, I'm going to walk through exactly how to decide when to take Social Security, because that single decision can be worth tens of thousands of dollars over your lifetime, and most people get it wrong. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.